Hey everyone, my name is Amber and I've just completed my MChem in Forensic and Investigative Chemistry at UEA. In my final year, I did a research project surrounding chemistry education, more specifically the closer integration of the Chemistry Cube textbook with the first year curriculum. So just as a little background to my project, previous literature has shown students are not using textbooks as an accompaniment to their learning, and this is despite all the research that shows that it would be beneficial for them to do so and that it would improve their academic outcomes. So I wanted to explore attitudes towards textbooks and how they could be used more effectively by both students and academics. And I focused specifically on Chemistry Cubed and therefore first year students, as they are quite often new to higher education and come in being expected to be fully autonomous learners, and so I wanted to implement something that would help them with that and set them up with good study skills for the rest of their degree. I set out 3 research questions at the start of my project that I wanted to address. First of all, what are student perceptions and experiences using textbooks? What effect does the closer integration of the set text with the course have, if any? And finally, how could student use of textbooks be both increased and improved? So I chose to facilitate this study with an infographic intervention. So what this meant is that I took all of the content that was delivered by lecturers on the 3 core compulsory modules, so that's organic, inorganic and physical chemistry, and mapped that against the information and practice questions in the Chemistry Cube textbook. I then put all of that information into a colourful infographic like the one on the screen and distributed them to students via the Blackboard virtual learning environment. In total, I made around 42 of these throughout the entire academic year. The project as a whole was primarily evaluated using a qualitative approach, so through semi-structured interviews. However, I also gathered quantitative data to support this. So here are just some more of the infographics that I created as part of this project. You'll see that they are all cohesive and eye-catching as an infographic should be, but they are also each unique, and especially in the flowchart style, you'll see that they vary quite a bit, and this is based on the teaching methods that each lecturer wanted to use. So we've got classic lecture style delivery and more active learning approaches as well. So in terms of quantitative results, I firstly gathered data from the UEA library about Chemistry Cubed usage. So this table on the left shows Chemistry Cubed to be the most used chemistry e-textbook, both in terms of the number of activations and the percentage usage, and this is significant because there are the most copies of Chemistry Cubed available and it has the highest percentage usage. It's also important to note that Chemistry Cubed is targeted primarily towards first year chemists, whereas the other textbooks listed are for 3, 4 plus academic years, and so would have a much wider student audience. Secondly, the graph on the right shows the number of successful section accesses of Chemistry Cubed online. So the data starts in August as students were recommended to complete pre-reading. We had a general upward trend until a predictable dip in December for the holidays, and then a peak in January, which corresponds to our second semester assessment period. I also generated data from Chemistry Cubed and the infographics themselves in order to assess whether it was a viable option to use Chemistry Cubed as the only first year chemistry textbook. So out of the 172 sections containing content in Chemistry Cubed, I mentioned 112 of them in the infographics, and the ones that weren't mentioned, it was either because they contained A-level content, optional module content such as analytical chemistry, or it had information that is actually delivered in second year at UEA. So I then actually decided to go a bit deeper into this data, and so of those 112 sections that were referenced, I wanted to see how many were referenced as organic, inorganic or physical chemistry or a combination, just to identify any potential shortcomings or biases of Chemistry Cubed and the information it's presenting. So you can see by the pie chart that it is mostly even, with inorganic having seemingly more references slightly than the others, and there are 2 explanations for this in my opinion. So firstly, Chemistry Cube started off as a favourite with the inorganic lecturers, and so it's not really surprising that their content would align better with the textbook. And this is also shown by the fact that I didn't have to use any secondary textbooks in the inorganic infographics, whereas I did have to for physical and organic chemistry. Secondly, there is quite a bit of overlap in the first year curriculum between organic and physical chemistry, namely the spectroscopy topics, and so these were counted as a combination in the pie chart and therefore lessening the proportion of organic and physical references individually. Now, in terms of qualitative results, as I mentioned earlier, a large proportion of the study was conducting semi-structured interviews, and I did this with 5 student participants and 5 academic participants. So interviewees were asked 10 questions in total, focused mainly on chemistry cubed and the infographic intervention, but they were very much encouraged to expand on anything that they thought would be useful for the project. So each interview was recorded, transcripts were made, checked, and then coded by myself and co-coded by another researcher to identify any standout themes from the responses. So as a result of that coding process, we identified 5 major themes from the participant responses. I also decided to group the student and academic responses together just so I could compare and contrast their views on certain topics. So first of all was general textbook usage, so this is aside from chemistry cubed and basically just previous experience. So we have student use, academic use, suitability and accessibility, which was mainly focused on the cost of textbooks actually. Secondly, we had chemistry cubed, obviously came up quite a lot. So we've got usage, the suitability of chemistry cubed, specifically with the UEA curriculum, and then positive and negative perceptions of the textbook as a whole. Next, the infographic intervention, so it's integration with the first year curricula, the development and any improvements of the infographics, and then positive perceptions. Next, we had alternate resources, so this is other textbooks and online resources, so that was mainly Google and YouTube, and the general consensus was that it was just easier to look things up on the internet than dig out your textbook and look for it that way. And then finally, although it wasn't directly posed as a research question, throughout the course of my project I got to have a look at all the different teaching methods used, particularly due to the move to online learning. These were very different, so this sort of encompassed utilisation of textbooks, student engagement and active learning approaches. In terms of limitations of the project, it was a typical undergraduate project, so I didn't have as much time as I would have liked, and also there was a small number of interviewees. I only had 10 participants, and although I made sure that they came from a variety of chemistry backgrounds, so we had physicists, biochemists, and then obviously organic, inorganic, physical chemists, the more the merrier. And in terms of future developments, this was basically focused on expanding the project. So it was suggested to include the foundation year curriculum or also the optional analytical chemistry module that I mentioned earlier. So finally, I just wanted to address the research questions that I posed at the beginning of the project. So firstly, what are student perceptions and experiences using textbooks? This was actually quite wide-ranging, and I hadn't expected that. Some students had no experience, some had loads with textbooks, but overall they all said that they found them quite intimidating and that had stopped them from using them as often as they would have liked to. Secondly, what effect does the closer integration of the set text with the course have, if any? So students expressed how seeing the correlation between their teaching sessions and the content in the textbook helped their understanding, and if I had longer I would have liked to have taken things like exam results and test results and sort of tested this theory. And finally, how could student use of textbooks be both increased and improved? And based on the interview responses, I can confidently say that the infographics had this effect. Students said that they would only use the textbooks if it was in conjunction with the infographics, and that it made studying a lot more easier and approachable for them. So thank you very much for listening.